Hello humans! Today I finally want to talk about this guy right here, my Buck 311. So I've actually owned this for almost 2 years now, I think. I've owned it for quite a while. It was the first buck knife that I had ever bought new, and it was the first time I'd ever bought a knife specifically as sort of just a toy to play with. Like, I had better knives. I knew I had better knives for EDC, but I ended up buying this guy because I'd never owned a knife with a opening hole like this before, and it looked like it would be a lot of fun. And I think I was right. It was also on sale, which definitely did influence my decision. Um, just start off with general details. It's got an under 3-inch blade. It's got a plastic overmolded handles with full-length liners underneath. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but it does have full-length stainless steel liners underneath. The whole thing is T6 pivot, T6 screws. It's got a one-position pocket clip, which kind of sucks if you're a lefty. It has this hole for opening, and it's a liner lock. So I'm going to start off with just some details that I really do like about this knife. For one thing, it has jimping up here where your thumb goes on the spine, but it also has jimping back here, where if you were to hold this in a reverse grip, a la knife fighter, you can actually index your thumb off of it. This isn't a style of tactical defense or knife fighting that I have any experience with, so this is not a particularly useful thing for me, but if you're the type of person who does that, I imagine it is quite nice. It also has jimping on the liner lock, which it's slightly cut out, but it's not really cut out. But that little bit of jimping actually adds quite a bit of traction when you go to close it, which makes it quite a bit easier to close than similarly profiled liner locks in my collection, which I do really like. And it is slightly contoured plastic, whatever this type of cast plastic is, I'm assuming. It's quite nice. It's got some neat texturing just for visual appeal. I don't know how well they're showing up on camera. Yeah, there you go. So it is textured, it feels quite nice in the hand, honestly. There's enough jimps up here between the plastic and on the blade where it's actually a very good spot. Like, I can put quite a bit of forward force on this knife in that direction without worrying about slipping too much, which I really like. It has the shape of the opening hole is fairly well designed in order to get the end of your fingertip in sort of that initial hook right there. So I find this very easy to flick. The detent is 90% of the way there, I'd say. It's a little bit... It doesn't have a very crisp release. The tension is perfect. It feels very nice, but the release isn't the most crisp feeling that it could be, which is honestly my only real negative about it. Obviously, I've been using it on and off for 2 years and I have sharpened it a couple times, so I can't speak to the original factory edge, but I do remember it being quite nice. It has Buck's amazing 420. I assume it's something to do with their heat treat. Even their Chinese-made Bucks, which this is a Chinese-made buck knife. Even their Chinese-made Bucks are really proceeds to flop the open. Are actually really well done. Something to do with their heat treat process, the way they do it. Even the non-Bose heat treats are really good, and I can't, even compared to other 410s in my collection, even compared to some nicer steels like 12C, I really like the Buck 420 mixture combination, whatever you want to call it. It has another thing that I really do like about this blade. I don't really like that little bit of smile that you get. It's from factory. I've just been preserving it over the sharpenings. But it has a nice flat section right here, which makes it really easy to do those push cuts and a lot of those sorts of tasks that do require a little bit of straight edge. Then it goes in and has quite a bit of belly for those more detailed cuts. And the point is very nicely in line with the center of your hand, right? You can imagine a line coming off from the center of your hand forward. It is very nicely in that line, which makes it really easy to use the point if I'm opening up feed bags or something like that. I find this knife really nice to use. The reverse flick, like I said, is 90% of the way. I really enjoy playing with this knife, and that is actually why I bought it. I saw it, I figured it would be a really nice flipper to play with, so I picked it up. A couple of things that I don't really like about it. For one thing, this is pretty, flop it again. This is more or less the only nice way to open it. It can be opened with a thumb flick. It is a little bit trickier to do, but it can be opened with a thumb flick. It doesn't get to the thumb as well, and if you're gonna like slow roll it open with your thumb, it is doable. It's not unpleasant, but it's not very pleasant either. This is sort of a 5 out of 10 perfectly average experience. Another thing that I'm not a huge fan of, is the hollow grind. I understand why they do this. It makes it much easier, much cheaper to produce. Fully understand. I'm still not the biggest fan of it. Most buck knives have a hollow grind. The phenomenal Buck 110, Buck 119, most buck knives have hollow grinds. I fully understand that, and I fully understand why that's the case. It's still not my favorite thing in the world on an EDC knife, especially one where, you know, I got it, yes, to be a toy, but I do still expect it to be able to do cardboard and that sort of thing fairly well. Another thing I'm not a huge fan of is the pocket clip. It works well enough. I don't like that the screws aren't recessed. That would have been a nice little detail, but I understand why they're not. And I would have liked something on this bill. It comes off, the way that it pops off like that, if I'm gripping this knife, it's a noticeable presence. It definitely makes a hot spot for me personally. But it works well, and I can't complain about it too much. Aesthetically, it's fine. It's not the nicest thing in the world. It does have Buck written on it, which, whatever. But really and truly, why I rant about this thing so much, why I love this thing so much, this is beyond a doubt, beyond a question, my favorite sub 20 Canadian dollar knife I've ever bought in my life. I picked this up for 16 Canadian dollars at Canadian Tire. It was on sale. It is usually on sale for that price. It has been discontinued, unfortunately. Most of the Canadian Tires in my area, I think there's 5 Canadian Tires within 2 hours of me, and of them 4 always have this knife in stock over the past couple of years. So, but they are disappearing. I love this knife. It is very comfortable to use. Like, even including that hotspot, I like using this knife. It's very fidget friendly, especially on a budget. Well, it's very fidget friendly as long as you just want to reverse flick it. The liner lock has been, I mean, it's, you know, 50% lockup. It locks up very solidly. I have, we'll say tortured this knife a little bit here and there, you know, poking it into blocks of wood or using it to carve ice and stupid stuff like that, you know, stuff where I am putting some force on the spine of the knife, twists or whatever, and I haven't had this lock hyperextend on me or anything like that. I've had to tighten the pivot twice, I believe, in the 2 years that I've owned it, which for me is really good. I've never had any of the rest of the screws back out for any reason. I like this knife. Another detail that I wanted to mention in my first section, but I forgot about, is that the liner's actually recessed into the plastic. So the liner lock actually recesses into that little opening right there. So you can see right there, when you move it out of the way, it's actually creates a full line of plastic, and it's cut out for that little liner, which I think looks great. It's not a very large knife, but it is a very comfortable knife. And speaking about size, let's get into some size comparisons before I just continue ranting and raving about how much I love this thing. Here it is next to the Civivi Chevalier and the Wee Banter. As you can see, it is a little bit bigger than the Wee Banter and quite a bit smaller than the Civivi Chevalier. Wee Banter is normally what I consider to be my lower limit as far as like medium knives are concerned. Anything smaller than a Wee Banter I consider to be a small knife. And anything bigger than a Buck 110 I consider to be a big knife, which I'm not even remotely worried about. Here it is next to a Buck 110 and my Zippo. As you can see, it's quite a bit smaller than the Buck 110. I mean, there's a couple inches there. And in terms of its width, it's a little bit wider than a Zippo, as you can see there, but it is nowhere near as wide as the Buck 110. Like, by a wide margin, it is quite a bit slimmer than the Buck 110. It's not going to be a particularly commanding presence in your pocket, but it's not necessarily small either. The other thing you can see is that it is not as tall as the Buck 110 is, but it is very, very close. And sort of the same deal for the Wee Banter. It is about the same height at its tallest point as the Wee Banter is, right? Which, you know, it's not a big object in the pocket, but it's not completely invisible either. It fits exceptionally well in a pair of jeans. I cannot recommend this knife enough, especially at that sub $20 price point. It has taken everything I've thrown at it over the last couple of years with absolutely no complaints. And I will admit there's a part of this that is aesthetic. I like the shape of the blade quite a bit. I like having some flat. I like having some belly. I like having this slightly upswept pot, that upturn space right here where I can index my thumb off of. I like the shape of the opening hole. But I think that this is an easy recommendation, even if you're not into buck knives necessarily. If you are a new collector who's looking for a middle flicking specific knife, this does a phenomenal job at that. It's easy to play with. It's super, super fun to play with. I've found myself on more than one occasion just sitting around flicking it open and closed. It holds its edge to the absolute limit of 420. This will hold its edge to it. So if you're like, this will hold its edge better than, I would argue, any knife in the sub 20 Canadian dollar category by a wide margin. I love this knife. I think it is a phenomenal deal, especially when you get it at its discounted price from Canadian Tire, which it almost always is. Yeah, I can't put out enough recommendations for this thing. I love it. I carry it very regularly. I've had no issues, no particular issues with scratching even. Like, it has a couple, but it's not too bad. I love this knife. Yeah, it is probably my third favorite buck that I own, full stop. Right below my 1970s Buck 110 and my Buck 102, which are both also just phenomenal knives. This is an absolute winner, in my opinion, and I can't speak highly of it enough. Stay safe, have fun out there. Peace.